Part 19. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jung Word. Chapter 181. Chapter 181. Is this okay? Sunian had to admit that Lee Baiken's medicine was really good. Sure enough, within 2 days, she could run and jump. She has also been paying attention to Huo Linyuan and Lu Jing's affairs these days. However, Lan Min's recent treatment really makes Sunian a little confused. After all, she is also the darling of 3 men, so why is her treatment so low? It is also for this reason that Sunian has stayed in the old house obediently these days. Watch how things develop. Of course she didn't do nothing. She writes love letters in her room when she has nothing to do. After all, she had to play a woman who couldn't love but was hurt by Lee Baiken. Well, if it was written, she copied it from the internet. After all, her brain cells were so precious, how could they be wasted on Lee Baiken? Just when Sunian Chao was enjoying himself, there was a knock on the door. Sunian put down his pen and opened the door. Opening the door, he saw a servant standing at the door. "Servant, madam, Miss Lan is here. She is at the door. Please see if you can come over." "Is Lan Min here?" Sunian chuckled lightly when he heard this. Since the heroine is here, she must go. When Sunian came to the door, seeing the embarrassed Lan Min, he almost didn't recognize him. At this moment, Lan Min was dirty all over, and there were even scars on his face. He didn't look weak and pitiful at all. He looked like a crazy woman. "Sunian, where is Baiken? What did you say to Baiken, and why did you let Baiken treat me like this?" After seeing Sunian, Lan Min subconsciously ran towards Sunian. But before she got close to Sunian, she was stopped by the servant. "What on earth did you say to Baiken? Why did you lock me in the hospital? Why didn't you see me?" Sunian was confused after hearing this. Lee Baiken locked her up in the hospital and didn't see her? How is this possible? Just when Sunian was confused, a group of men in black suits rushed in. At first, Sunian thought this was the male protagonist's subordinate. Then a man roughly grabbed Lan Min's hair. "Ms. Lan, Mr. Lee has ordered that you cannot leave the hospital. Please come back with me," the man said coldly. "I won't go back. Let me go. Let me go. I will see Baiken no matter what. It is impossible for Baiken to treat me like this." "You are not from Baiken." Lan Min's face was full of disbelief. Sunian was also surprised after hearing this. Lee Baiken's people? Is this true for Lan Min? This is simply impossible. If you know Lee Baiken's dog-licking setting, he wants to hold the whole world in front of Lan Min. How could he do this to Lan Min? "Mr. Lee gave you a chance, Miss Lan, as long as you choose him, but you didn't cherish the opportunity. If this is the case, then Mr. Lee can only take some coercive measures to make you understand who is right. Sincerely, who do you belong to?" Then the man in black took Lan Min away directly. The whole process was very rough. Sunian's brain is really messed up right now. What exactly happened? Why did Lee Baiken do this? But before Sunian called someone to investigate, Lee Jianhong appeared next to her. If it was really that little brat who did it, then that would be fine. Sunian looked at the old man in confusion after hearing this. Then Lee Jianhong said, "It's Lu Jing's people." In order to make this woman Lan Min completely give up on Baiken and Huo Linyuan, so that he could make a profit, so he bribed Baiken's people and targeted Baiken. All kinds of torture were done to Lan Ji in the name of the police. Sunian finished listening. "Is this okay?" Lee Jianhong smiled. "Of course, this is all my fault. I deliberately didn't let the news reach Baiken's ears. After Lu Jing has been tossing for a while, Lan Min will be disappointed with Baiken. All these things will be over. It was Lu Jing who did it, so he won't bother Baiken anymore." When he said this, Li Jianhong looked at Sunian seriously. "Nian Nian, Dad said, leave everything to me. Not telling lies. Lee Baikan, Dad, do you really want me and Sunian to be together? Why are you taking the credit? Sunian really didn't know what to say. He even felt a little sympathetic when he thought of Lan Min's miserable state just now. But Lee Ji-eunhong didn't live in vain for so many years. He saw Sunian's thoughts at a glance, and then sighed deeply. Nian, I know that you are a very kind child, but sometimes if you are too kind, you will be too kind. Maybe it's not a good thing, and Lan Min should do it now. If she hadn't been swinging between two men, or even three men, then it wouldn't be like this. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 182. Chapter 182 Nightmare. Dad, I know, Sunian replied with a smile. Sunian's uneasiness is really getting bigger and bigger. Because nothing like this really happened in my previous life. Sunian didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. The key was that she hadn't gotten the mo bow out yet. I'm just a little worried, this matter is a bit messy. That's just because they are messing up. No matter how hard they try, they can't mess with us. Sunian, Dad, if there is any news, can you tell me? I think this matter is really confusing, and I feel a little uneasy. Okay, Lee Ji-eunhong agreed directly, but when he saw Sunian's uneasy look, he still tried to comfort him. Nian, we are just outsiders in this scene. No matter how the scene goes or how it ends, it has nothing to do with us, so don't feel bad about those irrelevant people and things. My thoughts are those of a smart person. I believe you may understand what I mean. Sunian continued to nod, but there was a bitterness in his smile. Night. A bolt of lightning suddenly struck from the sky, as if it tore the sky into two halves. Then there was a deafening sound. It woke up Sunian directly. Sunian hugged her knees and her whole body was shaking. Actually, after realizing that she was wearing a book, she didn't have any special ideas. The reason for this is that for Sunian, it makes no difference no matter what world she lives in. She used to live in the so-called real world. She had lived in an orphanage since she had memories. She had never had any so-called relatives or friends. After coming to this world, after having the calligraphy treasure, she felt like she had a home. Having someone who is connected to you by blood. But after what happened during the day, Sunian fell into panic. The plot of this life has changed so much, then Mo Bao will not come to her side, although Sunian knows very well that God will not be too kind to her. I already have a lifelong mother-son bond with Mo Bao, that's enough. But she really couldn't control it. Can't control the greed in her heart. Those are the relatives connected to her by blood, the relatives she created herself. Does she really want to live her whole life alone? Sunian closed her eyes tightly. She could have endured the darkness, but she had enjoyed the light. At this moment, a laughter suddenly sounded in the dark room. You're so old, you can still be frightened like this by nightmares, and you're not afraid of being laughed at if the news spreads. Sunian was startled by the sudden sound, and she raised her head instantly. I saw the man walking out of the darkness and walking up to him. She looked at the man in front of her and couldn't help but be fascinated. He then stood up and hugged the man directly. Mo Bao, Mom finally sees you. Lee Baikan. Of course Lee Baikan understood that this woman was their future son. How can I describe this feeling? It's hard to describe. Are you going to give me a dream and tell me how to get you out? Mo Bao, you are the smartest. Can you tell me what method I will use to get you out? I really tried every means. Why is it so difficult? Lee Baikan could clearly feel the woman's sadness and didn't hear those messy sounds. But he really felt like he didn't know where to start. In the end, all he could do was pat her back gently to comfort Sunian. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 183. Chapter 183, he wants to make his own decisions about his life. When Lee Baiken came to the office, it was already bright. He looked at the bright environment. The thought of Sunian crying in his arms last night couldn't help but come to mind. He actually felt that it was not as bright as last night here. When this idea appeared in Lee Baiken's mind, he smiled. At this moment, the door was pushed open fiercely. Lee Baiken, what exactly did you do to Minor? Lee Baiken put away the smile on his lips, looked over following the voice, and saw Lu Jing with a furious face. Of course he knew what Lu Jing wanted to do. I just want to make the play more realistic, so that Lan Min really feels that the people who have tormented her these days are all her own. After all, Lu Jing actually broke into his office to cause trouble after knowing what he did to her. Lu Jing walked up to Lee Baiken and grabbed Lee Baiken's clothes. You asked me to deal with Huo Linyuan, and I dealt with it, but I'm not stupid. I'm so stupid that I didn't even know I was your chess piece. I'm just here for the poor man, but you have really touched my bottom line now, and I really doubt whether you love Lan Min or not. Lu Jing had already planned it. He used this excuse to come to Lee Baiken to settle accounts, and then beat the guy severely. In this case, he stole Lee Baiken's idea and was able to teach this reckless guy a lesson. After all, if this guy hadn't caused trouble, he would definitely have embraced the beauty long ago. What I do is never wrong. Then there was a huge noise in the office of the president of Lee Group. 3 minutes later, Lu Jing was lying on the ground with a ferocious face, but Lee Baiken's clothes were not wrinkled at all. I'm curious, you've been beaten by me not just once or twice, but why do you seem to not know that you can't beat me every time? Lee Baiken's voice was full of doubts. The sarcasm level is directly maxed out. Lu Jing. Nonsense, if you're a man, you can't back down. Lee Baiken, if you wait, I will beat you one day, and I will beat you to pieces. Now Lu Jing secretly vowed in his heart that he must fight. Lee Baiken looked at Lu Jing. At this moment, he was a little lucky, glad that his so-called personality was not as stupid as Lu Jing's. If he is really that stupid, then he feels that there is no need to live in this world. Forget it, don't say these are useless, we still find a way to do business. Have you forgotten Lan Min's body now? In fact, Lan Min's body is still because of Huo Linyuan. If we take care of Huo Linyuan, then Lan Min will not sad. Lu Jing stood up. I don't care who stops me now, I have to deal with Huo Linyuan. After all, kidney transplant surgery is very important to Jia. If Jia is always sad and uncomfortable because of Huo Linyuan, then this operation will treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Sure enough, after Lee Baiken said this, he could see a proud expression in Lu Jing's eyes. He knew that his plan had succeeded. This time he used Lu Jing's power to attack Huo Linyuan and Lan Ren at the same time. Even if he was not completely successful this time, it would still severely weaken the two of them. He doesn't even feel the so-called plot now. Next, he can use the second and third Lu Jing to directly deal with the so-called male and female protagonists of this world. No longer bound by the plot. He is who he is, not some licking male lead. His life is his own decision. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 184. Chapter 184. You are not qualified to negotiate terms with me. Sunian kept an eye on the news every day. Listening to Lee Baiken's end, he and Lu Jing besieged him. Hearing that Lan Min was treated like a madman in the hospital, he was even tied to the bed in the end. None of this is the plot in her memory. Every time she heard a piece of news, Sunian felt more and more uneasy. However, as an insignificant supporting role in this plot, she is not even qualified to participate in the main plot. Sunian felt as if there was a knife hanging above his head. A knife that might fall off at any time. Such a feeling really made Sunian uncomfortable, and she felt restless in the room every day. But soon, her restless days were over. The reason why he said this was because Sunian met Huo Linyuan. Huo Linyuan directly opened the door of the old house with strong force. Looking at Huo Linyuan walking towards him, Sunian couldn't help but step back. Why are you here? Why didn't I show up here? Li Baikan and Lu Jing are now chasing and intercepting them. I should have stayed in Huo's now and was so busy with the trouble they caused me, but why did I show up here? Here. Sunian couldn't help but feel chills all over his body when he heard Huo Linyuan's words. She forgot an important thing. This is a Mary Sue. Now that Lan Min's body is like this, and now her kidney is the only thing that can save her, how could the male protagonist Huo Linyuan do nothing? Now, including the old man's attention, all of his attention is on how to take advantage of this opportunity to kill Huo. Today, the old man went to meet old friends for dinner just for this reason, leaving him alone in this old house. Huo Linyuan, don't do this nonsense. No matter what, I am still Li Baikan's wife and the young mistress of the Li family. If you do anything to me, the Li family will never let you go. Sunian said the lines that needed to be said now, the brain is also spinning rapidly. Now that the plot has changed so much, she can't guarantee whether she will die. If you don't let me go, then I also want to see whether it is the Li family that is more powerful or my Huo Linyuan who is clever. Huo Linyuan smiled when he said this. Sunian, I know you are also a smart woman, you should I know that struggling now is useless, and may even lead to unreasonable disasters. In that case, I will come with you honestly. Anyway, this kidney of mine does not belong to me, and it is not given to anyone. Sunian shrugged honestly, but I hope Mr. Huo, you can take good care of your woman. I don't want to lose my kidney and still have no husband. Huo Linyuan turned around and said, you are not qualified to negotiate terms with me. Sunian, MMP, I even risked a kidney, but this is too much. Sunian then followed Huo Linyuan obediently. I have to say that Huo Linyuan was really fully prepared this time. The people they brought were all well equipped, as if they were waiting for the Li family to come to their senses and then come and rob them. But when Sunian saw this, he laughed directly. Because she knows it very clearly. No one will come. Even if the old man knew that she had been robbed, he came to the rescue in time. But Li Baikan would also stop it for the sake of Lan Min. So the situation she is in now is really in a state where the sky is not responding and the earth is not functioning properly. Now Sunian knows clearly that he can rely on himself. Sorry, today the editor suddenly informed me that it will be put on the shelves tomorrow, and it will be 8,000 tomorrow. Please subscribe a little bit, please. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 185. Chapter 185. The power appears again. While the vehicle is traveling, Sunian has been waiting for the opportunity. Waiting for the opportunity to jump directly out of the car and have a better chance of escaping. Well, although Sunian also knows that such behavior is indeed a bit stupid, but, this is the same situation in TV series and novels. As to whether it will be successful or not, let's go through the process. Sunian knew very well that there could be no problems with her kidneys. She had to ensure that she had a healthy body so that she could give birth to healthy Moba. She has to fight for Moba. Just when Sunian saw the vehicle entering a road she was somewhat familiar with and was about to take action, the radio of the person in the front row rang. Attention everyone, there is an attack, please be careful on defense. The driver immediately sounded the alarm. Then the vehicle began to shake violently. Sunian held the handle tightly, but still couldn't steady her body. Even at this time, the vehicle she was in was hit hard. Vehicles were knocked over. Sunian tried her best to get out of the car. At this moment, there was ringing in her ears. Sunian, Sunian. She seemed to hear someone calling her. Sunian couldn't help but turn around subconsciously. At this moment, an explosion sounded from the car next to her. The loud noise made Sunian fall to the ground. Sunian, Sunian, are you okay? Lee Baikan came to Sunian, his eyes were red at the moment. He pulled the person up roughly and carefully inspected Sunian's body. When he saw no obvious wounds on Sunian's body, he was relieved. Lee Baikan, put Sunian down for me, otherwise, you will be responsible for the consequences. Hearing Huo Linyuan's voice, he immediately turned his head. At this moment, he wanted to kill this man. He never thought that Huo Linyuan would take this opportunity to attack the old house and capture Sunian. At this moment, Lee Baikan didn't dare to think about what would happen to Sunian if Huo Linyuan succeeded. Huo Linyuan, do you think I might give you my wife? Huo Linyuan laughed directly, ha ha ha, wife, Lee Baikan, you can actually say this, wife, when you were pestering my woman, you never thought that you had a wife, and you still remember it now. The two parties faced each other. Don't think that you have any intention, just to use this woman's kidneys to force my woman to submit. I tell you, no way, no matter what happens today, you have to keep this woman. After Huo Linyuan finished speaking, both sides immediately prepared their weapons. Lee Baikan hugged the person in his arms tightly, then you come and try to see if you can keep my wife. At this moment, the two sides started fighting. Huo Linyuan, the male protagonist, walked towards Lee Baikan and the others step by step. Sunian looked at the male protagonist who was gradually walking towards him, and felt the powerful aura of the male protagonist, and couldn't help but shudder. Don't be afraid, I will protect you. Sunian couldn't help but raise his head when he heard this. Although Sunian knew clearly that the man said this because he wanted to save his sweetheart, she saw the man's firm gaze. Her originally flustered heart suddenly calmed down. Lee Baikan held Sunian tightly in his arms with one hand and fought with Huo Linyuan with the other. Even so, Lee Baikan's every punch was filled with cruelty. Haven't lost any chance at this time. Lee Baikan, you keep talking about loving Lan Min, is this your love for Lan Min? You tie up Sunian and threaten me. Aren't you afraid that something will happen to Lan Min? Lee Baikan knew that Huo Linyuan said this to distract him. But this guy is doomed to be disappointed. But at this moment, Lee Baikan's pupils suddenly shrank. Because that power appears again. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 186. Chapter 186. In this case, Huo Linyuan, a dog talker, would not say anything that would let the plot control him. Lee Baikan's heart was now panicking. Damn it, at this time, my body is occupied by the plot. He used all his strength to grab Sunian's hand, trying to control his body. A person like you is not worthy of loving Ji-Unner at all, so I have never regarded you as my enemy. I should let Ji-Unner see what you are like now. Huo Linyuan took advantage of this moment and gave Lee Baikan a hard punch. Lee Baikan, who was losing control of his body, had no chance to resist and received the punch directly. He suddenly knelt on the ground. But even so, he still didn't let go of Sunian's hand. Sunian also sensed something was wrong with Lee Baikan. Baikan, what's wrong with you? Hearing Sunian's voice, Lee Baikan suddenly felt a little stronger and stood up immediately. At this moment, veins popped up on Lee Baikan's face, and he shouted with all his strength, "Sunian is my wife, no one can take her away from me." "Haha, your wife, don't you think this is a bit funny? When did you, Li Baikan, regard this woman as your wife? If you really regarded this woman as your wife, then you would not pester my woman, Li Baikan. Even if you are looking for a reason, can you please stop looking for such a ridiculous reason? This reason really makes me laugh to death." Following Huo Linyuan's words, Li Baikan's strength dissipated again. Li Baikan understood. It's because Huo Linyuan's words are a disguised reminder of his personality. This plot takes control again. He tried hard to catch Sunian, but his strength was slowly fading. He looked at Sunian. At this moment, Sunian was shocked when he saw Li Baikan's eyes. She felt that there might be something wrong with her brain. How could she have such thoughts? However, by some strange coincidence, he held Li Baikan's hand in turn. The two held hands. Huo Linyuan's attack showed no sign of weakening, and he resisted with all his strength. Li Baikan is now on the defensive. He was looking for an opportunity to shut up Huo Linyuan. Hit with one hit. In this case, Huo Linyuan, a loser, would not say anything that would let the plot control him. Finally, Li Baikan found an opportunity. But now that he is holding Sunian's hand, the power of his fist will be greatly weakened, and he will not be able to hit with one hit. The only way is to let go of Sunian's hand. But if you let go, success or failure is always a matter of thought. He let go. Then he rushed towards Huo Linyuan with all his strength. But at this moment, Huo Linyuan suddenly shouted again, "I have endured it for so long just to bring Sunian back to Lan Mi, and no one died today, and no one can stop me from saving Lan Min, not even gods can't stop it." With these words, Li Baikan's power disappeared immediately. Huo Linyuan punched him in the stomach. But this time, he actually felt no pain. Why? Li Baikan tried hard to control his body and regain his strength. Careful. This sound brought Li Baikan back to his senses. Immediately he saw Sunian standing in front of him. "No one can touch my child's father." Sunian directly tried his best to help Li Baikan block Huo Linyuan's punch. "Li Baikan, do you really want to watch Lan Min die? I know you want to use this trick to win Lan Min's heart, but in this situation, I'm worried that Lan Min is in crisis now. Do you want to get Lan Min's heart's body?" Then Li Baikan saw Huo Linyuan grabbing Sunian and dragging her away. "No, do not want." He couldn't let Sunian be taken away by Huo Linyuan like this. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 187. Chapter 187. Don't even think about taking Sunian away, even the King of Heaven. If Sunian was really taken away, then Huo Linyuan, would Sunian, be tied to the operating table, and then take out Sunian's kidneys. Then there may not be a woman named Sunian in this world. Perhaps there is no Sunian in this world. If there were no Sunian in this world, then, I would never hear Sunian's messy voices again. The more Li Baikan thought about it, his body couldn't help but tremble, and an unprecedented panic came over him. No, there is absolutely no way he would let such a thing happen. At this moment, Li Baikan watched Sunian being taken away little by little, and he realized how important this woman who liked to talk nonsense was to him. So he desperately wanted to regain control of his body and break through the power that wanted to restrain him. He absolutely could not let Huo Linyuan take Sunian away like this. Even if he risked his life, he couldn't let Huo Linyuan take Sunian away like this. At this time, it started to rain. Heavy raindrops fell on him, but Li Baikan was completely unaware. "Sunian!" Li Baikan roared Sunian's name angrily. Blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. He gritted his teeth and stood up directly. At this moment, it was as if a knife was stabbed into his heart. But now Li Baikan seems to be unable to feel it. He only has one thought now. Huo Linyuan must not be allowed to take Sunian away. With every step he took, Li Baikan felt as if there were thousands of layers of barriers in front of him. But so what? He is going to break everything today. The King of Heaven, don't even think about taking Sunian away. Li Baikan caught up with Huo Linyuan, then punched the man hard in the face, and grabbed Sunian directly from his hand. Sunian, I won't let anything happen to you, and I won't let anyone hurt you in the slightest. In fact, Sunian has always felt that she was just a passerby in this scene, just going through the motions. Just a moment ago, she thought about being taken away by the male protagonist and ending as soon as possible. But at this moment, I saw the look in Li Baikan's eyes. The determination in his eyes made her heart suffocate. Why does Li Baikan have such an expression? When Sunian returned to his arms, Li Baikan's heart suddenly stabilized. He found the right opportunity and kicked Huo Linyuan in the chest. He pulled Sunian and ran towards the back like crazy. Behind him, Huo Linyuan led others to chase him. Sunian could feel how firm the man holding her hand was. The bullet passed by their ears. Sunian didn't know what this man was thinking, but she felt at this moment that if Li Baikan turned around and gave her a knife, she would be willing to do so. At this moment, a car rushed in front of them and stopped, directly blocking their way. When he saw the car, Li Baikan subconsciously held the person in his arms. Is God really so intolerant of them? Just when he thought of this, Lu Jing got out of the car. Li Baikan, leave this to me, I will deal with this guy, you go. When he saw Lu Jing, Li Baikan felt hope rekindled. At this time, Li Baikan was not polite. He just put Sunian into the car and got into the driver's seat. And just step on the accelerator and drive away. As he was leaving, he happened to see Lu Jing rushing towards the hero. Author, alas, after all, it was our Mr. Lu who took down everything. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 188. Chapter 188, Get some sleep and everything will be over. When Li Baikan brought the person back to his old house, he put the person on the bed. It's okay, I won't let this happen again, it won't happen again. At this moment, Li Baikan looked at Sunian in front of him, his eyes a little blank. He tried hard to listen. I want to hear her usual messy thoughts. But nothing was heard. Just when Li Baikan was about to call the doctor to come quickly, Li Jianhong came in a hurry. Li Jianhong yelled directly at Li Baikan, "What on earth do you want to do, Li Baikan, what do you want to do? You actually used Sunian as bait, how could you be so heartless and crazy?" As he said this, he wanted to drag him up. But this time it didn't move. At this time, the family doctor came. When I saw the two of them like this, I shivered a little. Just when he thought that he might have come at the wrong time and was about to run away, Li Jianhong yelled, "What do you want to do? You're here, so hurry up and check on Nian Nian. It's delaying your condition. Just wait for me. The family doctor will come quickly." Although Li Jianhong was very angry, he knew that now was not the time to lose his temper, so he let go of Li Baikan. During the examination time of the family doctor, Li Baikan's mind flashed back to the moment when there was an explosion around Sunian. At that moment, there was only fear in his heart. What if something happens to Sunian? What if there is no one named Sunian in this world, no one who can talk nonsense in his heart? That kind of fear cannot be described in words. Fortunately, come outside with me. Li Jianhong was a little more rational. Don't be so hypocritical and act like you care about Nian Nian. But Li Baikan had no intention of moving. This made Li Jianhong feel a little less angry, but then he became more angry. I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere. If Lee Ji-eunhong wasn't afraid of disturbing Sunian, he would have wanted to scold this guy severely right now. Just at this time, the family doctor spoke. Master, the young lady is just a little frightened. It's nothing serious. She just needs to take a good rest for a while. Is she really okay? Why is Nian's eyes empty now? Let me tell you, if you talk nonsense, you will not be able to bear the consequences. The family doctor's expression changed when he heard this. At this moment, Lee Baikan suddenly stood up and leaned into Sunian's ear. Go to sleep, take a nap, everything is over, it's all just a dream. As soon as Sunian said this, he closed his eyes. Dad, I know how you feel now, but no matter what you want, it's fine, but you have to wait until Sunian wakes up and there are no health problems. Then you can do whatever you want to me. Lee Baikan's hoarse voice. These words made Lee Ji-eunhong laugh. However, he knew that what Lee Baikan said was right, so no matter how angry he was and wanted to beat this guy up, he could still endure it. Lee Ji-eunhong took a deep breath and immediately walked outside. After all, Huo Linyuan actually broke into his old home of the Lee family and kidnapped his daughter-in-law. This was a great shame and humiliation for him and the entire Lee family. If he doesn't do something, everyone will think that the Lee family is weak and can be bullied. The Huo family can do whatever they want. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 189. Chapter 189. Damn it, what happened to this guy's eyes? Did he steal someone yesterday? Lee Baikan stayed by Sunian's side. Watched all night. This night was the most difficult night for Lee Baikan in his memory. It was all because of his mistakes. He was always thinking about how to avoid risks if he attacked the so-called male protagonist. He never thought about whether this would involve Sunian. On this night, Lee Baikan understood one thing. This woman, whose mind is full of chaos and always talking nonsense, seems to have entered his heart. Lee Baikan didn't know when this woman walked in. Just like the spring rain, it is as silent as the spring rain, slowly blending in. Lee Baikan held her hand tightly. He won't let something like this happen to her again, and he won't let her get hurt at all. Once you realize it, there is no way to stop it. Looking at Sunian's quiet face, the corners of Lee Baikan's mouth rose slightly. As the sun rises slowly, a new day has arrived. Finally, Sunian slowly opened his eyes. The moment he saw Sunian open his eyes, Lee Baikan really didn't know how to describe his mood at the moment. It was like a person who had reached a dead end and saw hope of life. Just when Lee Baikan was about to say something, Sunian's voice sounded in Lee Baikan's mind again. Shit, what's wrong with this guy's eyes? Did he steal someone yesterday? Lee Baikan. Sunian blinked. Lee Baikan didn't know what to say. At this moment, Lee Ji-eunhong's voice sounded, is Nian awake? Sunian heard Lee Ji-eunhong's voice and immediately sat up. When Lee Ji-eunhong saw Sunian sitting up, he immediately took a few steps. Nian, you finally woke up, you know. I was really scared to death yesterday. If something happens to you, what will I do? Ah! When Sunian heard this, he broke free from the hand held by Lee Baikan, then lifted the quilt and got out of bed. But before she could get out of bed, Lee Baikan covered her with a quilt. Your body needs a good rest now, so you can't get out of bed. I'm fine, I'm really fine. Lee Baikan looked at Sunian and realized at this moment that in fact, Sunian could be said to have suffered a lifetime. After all, he had gone around in such a circle to deal with the so-called male protagonist, and the final result was this. It can be seen that Sunian in the previous life was how difficult it is. Moreover, Sunian in her previous life had to worry about her children. Li Baikan had been in contact with Huo Linyuan for so long anyway, and he knew that that guy was a man who would do whatever it took to achieve his goals. If Sunian faced him. At this moment, the old man's voice rang out, "Nian Nian, it's okay if you're okay. You may not know that I was really scared to death yesterday. I guarded you all night. I guarded you. When you were young, you were afraid of how you would tell your parents if something happened to you." Li Baikan. Then he saw Sunian was moved to tears. When I woke up and saw Li Baikan, I was still a little confused. When did this licking dog have a conscience? It turned out that he really thought too much. Dad is really great. I even think that my biological parents may not be as good to me as him. No, I want to treat him as my biological father. No, he will be my biological father from now on. I will definitely do it in the future. Honor him well. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 190. Chapter 190. It was just an accident. Dad, I'm sorry for making you worry. I'm fine, I really am fine. Li Jianhong was looked at by Sunian like this. I still feel a little guilty. After all, he is talking nonsense. He didn't stay by Sunian's side all night. But after all, he still needs to save face at such an old age. What happened this time was his mistake, and he failed to ensure the security of the old house. How could Huo Linyuan break in so easily? But then I thought about it, Li Baikan, this little brat, didn't want to have anything to do with Sunian anyway, so he probably wouldn't expose him. But don't worry, I will definitely not let something like this happen again. I have already ordered you to increase the security facilities here several times. I guarantee that not a single mosquito can fly in. Seeing the old man like this, Sunian quickly comforted him. Dad, this was just an accident. After all, no one expected that Huo Linyuan would come here, so I don't blame you. Don't blame yourself too much. Besides, this matter has already happened. If it happens, even if I blame you, it won't change anything. Instead, it will affect your body, so don't think too much about it. This made Li Jianhong feel even more guilty. Such a good woman, why is his son so blind that he can't even see her? It's not safe here anymore. Sunian had better not stay here anymore. Li Baikan's words immediately broke this warm scene. Li Jianhong frowned when he heard this, with a hint of anger on his face. Why can't you stay here? It was just an accident. I won't let such a thing happen again. And you said it's not safe here, then you tell me, is there a safer place than here? Now Li Jianhong's dissatisfaction with Li Baikan has reached the extreme. By my side. Li Jianhong laughed after hearing these words. If it were before, then Li Jianhong would definitely be happy when he heard this, and he would definitely feel that his son had enlightened. But after what happened, Li Jianhong only felt funny. He immediately walked up to Li Baikan and said, "Next to you, haha, I really don't understand why you can say such things. Don't forget why this happened. You are the initiator of all this. You, Li Baikan, used your body to please your sweetheart. If it hadn't been for you, nothing like this would have happened." These words left Li Baikan speechless. His mind also came to mind, he had forced Sunian to go. This made Li Baikan take a few steps back. The moment Sunian heard this, he subconsciously understood that his opportunity had come, and planned to say some tea talk, but for some reason, when he saw the look in Li Baikan's eyes, Sunian felt a little nauseous. "Come out." Hey, Li Baikan looks so pitiful like this, but he and Mo Bao are really father and son, and they even look aggrieved. Forget it, for Mo Bao's sake, I will put in a good word for this guy. After all, his actions are all caused by being punished. The so-called plot arrangement is not his original intention. Dad, don't blame Baikan. When Li Jianhong heard this, he sighed, Nian Nian, You are so kind. You are like this and you still speak for this guy. If you are like this, who will suffer if you don't suffer? End of this chapter.